The Interstellar Predator Classification Bureau had exactly one job: keep track of who could legally hunt whom across 17,000 registered systems. This might sound simple, until you realize that the galaxy contained approximately 4 million sentient species, each with their own opinions about which creatures qualified as food versus friends. The IPCB's headquarters, a massive crystalline structure orbiting a neutron star, employed roughly 600,000 bureaucrats, whose sole purpose was determining whether species A could ethically chase species B through a forest while wielding advanced weaponry. The whole system relied on a relatively straightforward hierarchy. Class 1 predators sat at the apex, being so formidable that hunting them required special permits, insurance policies, and frequently, a last will and testament. Class 5 occupied the bottom tier, creatures so harmless that killing them would be roughly equivalent to declaring war on a particularly aggressive houseplant. Everything else fell somewhere in between, creating a Byzantine maze of regulations that made filing taxes look like a relaxing afternoon activity. Now, the IPCB took their work seriously. They had to. 3 centuries prior, the HFY incident had taught everyone a valuable lesson about proper species classification. Some genius had categorized the HFY as Class 4 prey animals based on their fluffy appearance and general docility. This assessment lasted exactly 4 hours into the first official hunt, at which point the prey animals revealed their secondary neural systems, 18 hidden blade appendages, and a rather nasty habit of liquefying their attackers from the inside out. The subsequent lawsuits had bankrupted 2 entire planetary economies. These days, the Bureau exercised extreme caution. Every species underwent rigorous testing, intelligence assessments, physical capability matrices, technological advancement metrics, and most importantly, the will they absolutely murder you if provoked evaluation. This final test proved surprisingly predictive of hunting outcomes. Humans had been registered in the system for approximately 14 standard years. Their classification sat in a peculiar gray zone that made bureaucrats nervous. On paper, they checked several alarming boxes. Tool users? Check. Pack hunters? Absolutely. Endurance predators capable of literally running prey to death? Unfortunately, yes. However, their official designation read, Class 3 non-aggressive developing species, approach with standard caution. This classification existed mostly because humanity's initial contact with the galactic community had involved a cargo vessel captain named Marcus Webb, accidentally wandering into a first contact scenario while looking for a bathroom. The assessment committee, meeting this confused individual who kept apologizing and asking if anyone had seen his protein bars, determined that humans posed minimal threat to established galactic order. They were wrong, of course, but bureaucratic momentum is a powerful force. The regulations surrounding human interaction were therefore somewhat relaxed. Don't kidnap them for experiments, obviously. Avoid enslaving them, because that created terrible publicity. And definitely don't hunt them, because they were provisionally sentient and killing sentient beings violated approximately 4,000 intergalactic laws, treaties, and strongly worded suggestions. Vextheron the Magnificent either hadn't read these regulations, or had decided they didn't apply to someone of his stature. Given his ego, probably the latter. Vextheron belonged to the Krizik species, a race of 8-foot-tall reptilian hunters who had elevated predation to an art form. Their homeworld featured 12 distinct climate zones, 17 different megafauna species, and exactly 0 safety regulations regarding wildlife interaction. Krizik children learned to track, stalk, and kill before they learned basic mathematics, which explained both their impressive hunting skills and their terrible collective credit scores. Within Krizik society, Vextheron occupied the upper echelons. His trophy room contained the preserved remains of creatures from 400 different worlds. He had hunted in methane storms, lava fields, zero-gravity environments, and one memorable occasion inside a sentient nebula that had been extremely offended by the whole experience. His clan name translated roughly to "he who makes prey regret their evolutionary choices," though the poetic nuances were difficult to capture in standard galactic common. He stood in the docking bay of Terminus Station 7, examining his equipment with the satisfied air of someone who knew exactly how the next few hours would unfold. His armor, a sleek black composite that could withstand plasma fire and kinetic impacts, bore the scratches and scorch marks of 1,000 hunts. 4 different blade weapons hung from his belt, each designed for specific killing techniques. His primary rifle, a masterwork of Eldrin engineering, could punch through 6 inches of starship hull plating or, more relevantly to his current interests, any organic tissue in the known galaxy. Terminus Station 7 was not a glamorous location. Built into a massive asteroid at the edge of charted space, it served primarily as a way station for cargo haulers, prospectors, and people who had excellent reasons for avoiding more civilized sectors. The station's population hovered around 3,000 on good days, consisting mainly of species that others found vaguely disturbing or extremely boring. The administrative AI that ran most station functions had developed a drinking subroutine just to cope with the monotony. Vextherin had come here specifically because Terminus Station 7 existed in a regulatory blind spot. Too remote for regular patrols, too unimportant for serious oversight, and managed by an AI that had long since stopped caring about minor legal violations like, say, illegal hunting expeditions. The station's lower levels, a labyrinth of maintenance tunnels and cargo storage areas, housed a rumored population of creatures that had escaped from various shipments over the years. Verification was difficult because nobody wanted to spend time in those cramped, poorly lit corridors, cataloging whatever might be living down there. Perfect hunting grounds, in other words. What Vextherin didn't know, because he'd been too busy admiring his own reflection in polished surfaces, was that Terminus Station 7 also housed a small human population. Approximately 40 humans worked on the station, most of them in cargo management or engine maintenance, jobs that other species found either too tedious or too physically demanding. Humans, it turned out, were excellent at both tedious work and physical labor, making them surprisingly valuable employees in backwater locations where nobody else wanted to work. Marcus Webb, the same Marcus Webb who had accidentally initiated first contact while desperately needing a bathroom, worked as a cargo specialist on Terminus 7. His job involved moving heavy containers from one location to another, verifying shipment manifests, and occasionally climbing into cramped maintenance shafts to retrieve items that had fallen into unfortunate locations. It paid adequately, demanded minimal social interaction, and allowed him to listen to his music collection during work hours. For someone who had accidentally become a historical figure in human-alien relations, Marcus had achieved a remarkable level of anonymity. He was, at this precise moment, having a spectacularly bad day. The morning had started normally enough. Wake up in his cramped quarters, consume adequate caffeine, report to the cargo bay, and begin processing the latest shipment manifests. Everything proceeded smoothly until approximately 10:47 station time, when a power fluctuation in Sector 12 caused a cascading systems failure that shut down artificial gravity in the lower maintenance levels. Marcus, who had been climbing through a Jeffries tube equivalent to retrieve a misplaced container of xenobotanical samples, suddenly found himself floating in zero gravity while clutching said container, which had begun leaking a substance that smelled like a combination of rotting fruit and burning electrical insulation. The emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everything in an ominous red glow that suggested either imminent danger or a really aggressive design choice. Getting back to normal gravity zones required navigating 300 meters of tunnels while avoiding both floating debris and whatever that smell was. Marcus, demonstrating the problem-solving skills that had served humanity well for millennia, wedged himself against the tunnel walls and began carefully pushing forward, mentally composing the complaint he would file with station management. He was approximately halfway to safety when he heard something behind him. Not something mechanical. Not the groan of metal or the hiss of equalizing pressure. Something organic. Something that sounded like claws scraping against composite plating. Marcus stopped moving. His pattern recognition system, that ancient bit of neural architecture that had kept his ancestors from being eaten by large cats, started screaming warnings directly into his consciousness. He was being hunted. Vex Theron had entered the lower levels approximately 10 minutes earlier, tracking what his scanner identified as a moderate-sized creature registering thermal signatures in the tunnels ahead. The power failure had been unexpected but not unwelcome. Reduced lighting added challenge to the hunt. The zero gravity was irritating, but he'd hunted in worse conditions. His scanner indicated the target ahead, moving slowly through the maintenance shaft. Size suggested something roughly analogous to the Terran fauna he studied briefly. Those peculiar mammalian creatures that had dominated their planet before developing sentience and ruining a perfectly good hunting ground with civilization. Perhaps some escaped specimen, or a native station pest that had grown larger than expected. He activated his armor's magnetic grips, allowing him to walk along the tunnel walls with steady, purposeful steps. His thermal vision painted the environment in shades of blue and orange. The target glowed bright yellow-white ahead, its body heat signature unmistakable. Vex Theron activated his wrist computer, preparing to log the kill for his personal records. Species: unknown. Location: Terminus Station 7, lower maintenance. Method: he would decide that when he got closer, depending on whether he wanted the trophy intact or preferred demonstrating a particularly artistic killing technique. He rounded the corner and saw his prey clearly for the first time. It was approximately 6 feet tall, bipedal, with pale skin mostly covered by some kind of synthetic protective covering. No visible natural weapons. No scales or armored plates, no claws or fangs evident from this distance. Minimal muscle definition suggested a creature unused to physical confrontation. Easy prey. Almost disappointing, really. Then the creature turned around. Marcus faced the massive reptilian hunter with the expression of someone who had just realized his day was about to get significantly worse. His mind, running through threat assessment at impressive speed, noted several key details. 8 feet tall, professional-grade hunting equipment, weapons that could probably vaporize him, and body language that strongly suggested he was looking at the station's most unwelcome tourist. His options were limited. Running seemed pointless in zero gravity. Fighting appeared suicidal. Diplomacy might work if this creature understood language and wasn't actively interested in adding him to a trophy collection. Marcus decided on a fourth option: aggressive problem-solving. The maintenance tunnel around him contained various tools and equipment secured to the walls with magnetic clamps. He'd noticed them while navigating forward, part of that automatic environmental awareness that humans developed when working in dangerous locations. His hand moved toward the nearest item, a plasma cutting torch used for repairs on damaged hull sections. Vex Theron watched the creature reach for the tool with mild interest. Was it going to attempt defense? How amusing! The plasma torch activated with a sharp hiss, its blue-white flame extending roughly 8 inches from the nozzle. The creature held it forward like a weapon. Vex Theron laughed, the sound emerging as a deep clicking roar from his translator. This thing thought a maintenance tool would stop him. He'd survived weapons fire from military-grade artillery. He'd been stabbed by crystalline predators whose claws could pierce starship armor. He'd once wrestled a Gorkan deathworm into submission using only his secondary arms. He activated his wrist blade and launched forward, magnetic boots propelling him toward his prey with practiced efficiency. Marcus ducked, not elegantly, not with any particular grace. He simply dropped into a lower crouch and pushed off against the wall, sending himself tumbling sideways in the zero gravity. The Krizik hunter sailed past him, confused by the sudden absence of target, and Marcus swung the plasma torch in a wide arc that caught the edge of the hunter's armor and carved a glowing line across the composite plating. Vex Theron twisted in mid-movement, his combat training overriding his surprise. The creature had dodged, intentionally, with strategy. That implied higher cognition than his initial assessment suggested. He recalculated his approach, activating his armor's stabilizers to stop his momentum. Marcus didn't give him time to recover. He grabbed a large wrench from the nearest tool rack and hurled it with all his strength. The heavy instrument sailed through zero gravity in a straight line directly toward the hunter's head. Vex Theron batted it aside contemptuously, and Marcus used that split-second distraction to push himself further down the tunnel, heading toward the maintenance junction where gravity resumed. The hunt had suddenly become interesting. Vextheron pursued with renewed focus. The creature was intelligent, tool user, problem solver, capable of abstract thinking and tactical assessment. This wasn't prey. This was dangerous, which made it absolutely perfect. He activated his scanner again, actually reading the full biological profile, this time instead of skimming the basics. Bipedal mammalian. Significant endurance capacity, unusual skeletal density, high adaptability rating, and the species designation that he'd ignored earlier, human, developing sentient species. Protected status under Section 447 of the Interstellar Wildlife Preservation Act. Vextheron experienced a moment of genuine panic that lasted approximately 0.3 seconds before his ego reasserted control. Protected status meant nothing if nobody knew about the kill. He would complete the hunt, dispose of the evidence, and return to civilized space with no one the wiser. He accelerated his pursuit. Marcus reached the maintenance junction, where gravity reasserted itself with sudden, uncomfortable force. He dropped 3 feet and landed badly, his ankle twisting but not breaking. Pain shot through his leg, but he forced himself forward, limping toward the cargo bay entrance. Behind him, he heard the hunter's footsteps, no longer magnetic grips but actual running, the sound of something large and fast and very determined. The cargo bay ahead was massive, a cathedral of metal and machinery designed for loading and unloading containers from various ship configurations. Crates were stacked in irregular patterns, creating a maze of hiding spots and potential cover. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh shadows. Marcus dove behind the nearest container stack just as plasma fire scorched the wall where he'd been standing. The hunter had switched to ranged weapons, apparently done with pretending this was sporting. Vextheron stalked into the cargo bay with predatory grace, his rifle raised and tracking. The creature was hiding somewhere in this maze of containers. Standard hunting protocol dictated patience. Wait for the prey to panic, to make noise, to give away its position. Then strike. He activated his thermal scanner and immediately swore in 3 different languages. The cargo bay's thermal signature was a chaotic mess. Dozens of containers radiated different heat levels depending on their contents. Cooling systems and heating elements created temperature gradients that confused his sensors, and the station's damaged environmental systems were dumping hot air into the bay at irregular intervals, creating thermal ghosts everywhere. Finding the human would require actual tracking skills. Marcus pressed himself against the container, breathing quietly despite his racing heart. His options had gone from bad to worse. The hunter had superior weapons, armor, probably enhanced senses, and definitely more experience with this sort of situation. Marcus's advantages consisted of knowing the cargo bay layout, familiarity with the equipment, and the desperate creativity that humans developed when large predators wanted to kill them. He looked around the container, assessing available resources. Magnetic cargo lifters lined the walls. Plasma welding equipment sat on a nearby work table. Emergency fire suppression systems were installed in the ceiling, and directly ahead, approximately 40 feet away, sat a massive shipping container marked with hazard warnings in 17 different languages. An extremely terrible idea began forming in Marcus's mind. He grabbed a magnetic clamp from the nearest lifter, set its power to maximum, and hurled it across the bay. It sailed through the air and attached to a metal support beam with a loud CLA engine that echoed through the space. Vextheron spun toward the sound and fired 3 shots in rapid succession, plasma bolts vaporizing the area around the beam. No body. No blood, a diversion. He growled in frustration and continued his careful advance, checking each potential hiding spot with methodical precision. The human was clever, more clever than expected, but cleverness only delayed the inevitable. He rounded a container stack and came face to face with Marcus, who was holding what appeared to be a fire suppression system nozzle connected to an extremely long hose. Marcus pulled the trigger. High-pressure chemical fire retardant exploded from the nozzle with enough force to knock Vextheron backward. The hunter's armor protected him from the direct impact, but the foam rapidly expanded to fill the entire area, reducing visibility to zero and coating everything in thick and sticky white substance that clung to his sensors and obscured his vision. Vex Theron roared and fired blindly, plasma bolts cutting through the foam but hitting nothing substantial. He activated his armor's filtration systems and pushed forward, clearing foam from his visual receptors with angry swipes. By the time he emerged from the chemical cloud, Marcus had already moved to position 2 of his terrible plan. The human stood next to the hazard-marked container, one hand on what appeared to be emergency release controls. Even through the foam residue coating his sensors, Vex Theron could read the warning labels: volatile xenochemicals, maintain temperature control, unauthorized access forbidden. Marcus met the hunter's gaze with an expression that clearly communicated, "I have absolutely no idea if this will work, but I'm definitely going to find out." Vex Theron charged. Marcus pulled the emergency release, dove sideways, and prayed to whatever deities might be listening that his understanding of xenochemical reactions was accurate. The container's magnetic locks disengaged. The temperature control systems shut down. And the volatile xenochemicals inside, which had been kept in careful stasis, suddenly found themselves exposed to room temperature and standard atmospheric pressure. They reacted poorly. The explosion wasn't nuclear scale, but it was definitely impressive by most standards. The container ruptured with a sound like a thunderclap, releasing a shockwave that knocked both Marcus and Vex Theron off their feet. Chemical compounds mixed in ways their creators had specifically designed them not to mix, creating a cascading reaction that released approximately 3 times the normal amount of thermal energy, while producing thick clouds of purple smoke that smelled like burning cinnamon. Marcus hit the floor hard, his head bouncing off the deck plating with a sickening crack. Pain exploded through his skull, white light flashing across his vision. He tasted blood. His ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. Consciousness began slipping away like water through his fingers. His last thought before darkness took him was, "This is absolutely going in my complaint to station management." Vex Theron, protected by his armor, recovered faster. He stood shakily, his systems rebooting from the electromagnetic pulse that had accompanied the explosion. His trophy hunt had gone catastrophically wrong. The human had demonstrated tool use, tactical thinking, environmental adaptation, and suicidal courage in equal measure. And he'd nearly won. The hunter approached the unconscious human, noting the blood pooling beneath its head, the irregular breathing, the obvious signs of severe trauma. He raised his rifle, prepared to end this before complications arose. Then he heard voices, multiple voices, coming from the bay entrance. Station security had finally responded to the explosions and chaos. Vex Theron made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He activated his personal shield, turned, and ran directly toward the emergency airlock, leaving the dying human behind. By the time security personnel entered the cargo bay, he had already cleared the station perimeter and was accelerating toward his cloaked ship. Behind him, he left enough evidence to convict him in approximately 4,000 different jurisdictions. The security team found Marcus within seconds, the blood immediately triggering their emergency medical protocols. The lead officer, a 4-armed Velpian named Crix, who had seen approximately everything during his 20 years on Terminus 7, took one look at the scene and activated his communicator. Medical emergency, Cargo Bay 7. Human down with severe head trauma. And someone get the station AI to review security footage, because I'm pretty sure we just had an illegal hunting incident. The AI, which had been monitoring the situation with slowly dawning horror, immediately flagged the footage and transmitted it to approximately 40 different law enforcement agencies simultaneously. Within 3 minutes, every major news network in 7 sectors was receiving anonymous tips about a Krzyk hunter who had just committed the single most documented illegal hunt in galactic history. Vex Theron's career was over. He just didn't know it yet. The medical bay on Terminus 7 was designed for emergencies, but rarely dealt with anything more serious than industrial accidents or exotic food poisoning. The facility's chief physician, a Corlaxian doctor named Thex, who had 4 medical degrees and chronic anxiety, received the emergency call with his usual mixture of professional competence and internal panic. Human medical treatment fell into a category that most alien physicians found deeply disturbing, theoretically impossible yet somehow functional. Human anatomy violated so many biological principles that medical schools typically devoted entire courses to explaining why humans shouldn't exist yet did anyway. Thex reviewed Marcus's condition with growing concern. Severe skull fracture, intracranial bleeding, concussion, possible spinal damage, blood pressure dropping, and the human was somehow still alive despite injuries that would have killed most species instantly. Prepare Surgical Suite 3. Thex ordered his assistants. And someone find me the xenobiology database with human trauma protocols. Quickly. The surgical team assembled with impressive speed, each member reviewing what little information existed about human physiology. Humans healed. That was their primary feature. Cut them, stab them, break their bones, and they would eventually regenerate the damage through a biological process that seemed more like science fiction than actual medicine. But regeneration required time, and Marcus didn't have time. The bleeding in his brain was increasing pressure on neural tissue. Without intervention, he would die within hours. Thex began the surgery with hands that trembled slightly despite his experience. Opening a human skull required specialized techniques because human bone was significantly denser than equivalent tissue in most species. Their skeletal structure had evolved for endurance and impact resistance, making them surprisingly difficult to damage but equally difficult to repair when damage occurred. The bone saw made a sound that everyone in the surgical suite tried to ignore. Fracture extends approximately 8 centimeters, Thex reported to his assistants. I'm seeing subdural hematoma, significant cerebral swelling. Beginning pressure relief procedure. What followed was 3 hours of the most stressful surgery Thex had performed in his entire career. Human brains were absurdly complex, packed with neurons in configurations that seemed designed to maximize both computational power and vulnerability to damage. Every move had to be precise. Every tool had to be perfect. One mistake would result in permanent damage or death. The assistants worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring vital signs and providing instruments as needed. One of them, a young physician fresh from medical school, kept muttering statistics under their breath. Human skull thickness averages 6.5 millimeters. Bone density 1,900 kilograms per cubic meter. Healing rate 3 millimeters of bone growth per week. This is insane. This species is insane. Focus, Thex ordered, though privately he agreed with the assessment. Humans were biological impossibilities that had somehow achieved sentience, space travel, and the ability to survive injuries that would liquefy most other species. He carefully repaired the damaged blood vessels, relieved the intracranial pressure, and began the delicate process of reconstructing the skull fracture. Human bone would eventually grow back, but in the immediate term, they needed synthetic plating to protect the brain tissue. 6 hours after beginning the surgery, Thex stepped back and reviewed his work with exhausted satisfaction. Marcus Webb would live. He would probably have headaches for weeks and need extensive recovery time, but he would survive. Impossible species, Thex muttered affectionately, stripping off his surgical equipment. Absolutely impossible. Marcus woke up 3 days later with the worst headache in human history and approximately 400 unread messages on his communication device. The first thing he saw was a Corlaxian doctor, looking extremely pleased with himself. The second thing was the bandages, covering roughly 40% of his head. The third thing was the news feed playing on the wall screen, showing what appeared to be his own face accompanied by headlines in multiple languages. "You're famous," Thex explained cheerfully. "The human who survived the Vextheron incident. Very impressive. How do you feel?" Marcus considered the question carefully. His head hurt. His entire body hurt. He was apparently famous, which sounded terrible, and according to the news feed, he'd survived an encounter with one of the galaxy's most dangerous hunters. "Like I got hit by a cargo container," Marcus said finally. "What happened to the hunter?" "Arrested approximately 6 hours after fleeing the station," Thek said with obvious satisfaction. Turns out running from a major crime scene while leaving behind extensive video evidence is poor strategy. The Interstellar Court has charged him with illegal hunting, attempted murder of a sentient being, reckless endangerment, property destruction, and approximately 47 other violations. His trial starts next month. Marcus absorbed this information slowly, his injured brain processing at reduced speed. So I'm not being charged with blowing up station property. Station management has decided that exploding a container full of volatile chemicals while defending yourself from an illegal hunter falls under acceptable emergency protocols, Thek said, though they have requested you submit a detailed incident report, in writing, with diagrams. The trial of Vex Theron the Magnificent attracted galactic attention on a scale rarely seen outside of major political scandals. The courtroom, a massive amphitheater on the neutral judicial station Corona Verdant, held approximately 5,000 spectators and another million viewing remotely. The prosecution had an easy job. They played the security footage, which showed in high definition exactly what had occurred. A Krizik hunter stalking and attempting to murder a human cargo worker who had defended himself with increasingly creative desperation. The video of Marcus using fire suppression foam became an instant galactic meme. The explosion scene was viewed approximately 3 billion times across various networks. Vex Theron's defense attorney, a Threxian lawyer named Chix, who specialized in hopeless cases, attempted several strategies. First, he argued that his client had genuinely believed humans were non-sentient prey animals based on their classification ambiguity. The prosecutor displayed Marcus's personnel file, which included details about his education, work history, and the fact that he had initiated first contact between humanity and the galactic community. Chix tried a second approach. Vex Theron had been defending himself from an aggressive creature that attacked him first. The prosecutor played the footage again, highlighting the part where Vex Theron was clearly stalking Marcus through maintenance tunnels with weapons drawn. Chix attempted a third strategy based on cultural relativism and different species' perspectives on hunting ethics. The judge, an ancient Pelvorian magistrate who had presided over approximately 8,000 cases, interrupted this approach with a single question. Counselor, did your client, or did he not attempt to murder a legally protected sentient being? Chix sighed. Yes, Your Honor. Then we're done here. The sentencing took longer than the trial. The court had to calculate violations across multiple legal frameworks, each carrying different penalties. Illegal hunting, 15 years imprisonment. Attempted murder, 40 years. Reckless endangerment, 10 years. Destruction of station property, 5 years. And approximately 47 other charges that added up to a total sentence of 233 years in a maximum security facility designed for dangerous predator species. Vex Theron the Magnificent, whose name would now be remembered as that idiot who tried to hunt a human, was led away in restraints while news networks across the galaxy provided commentary. Marcus, watching from his hospital bed on Terminus 7, turned off the news feed and went back to sleep. The Interstellar Predator Classification Bureau convened an emergency session approximately 2 weeks after the incident. The hearing room buzzed with urgent conversation as bureaucrats reviewed the evidence and argued about proper protocol. The question before them was simple: how should humans be reclassified in light of recent events? Arguments raged for hours. Some advocated for Class 1 status, pointing out that Marcus had nearly killed a professional hunter using only maintenance equipment and environmental awareness. Others suggested Class 2, acknowledging human capability, while noting they typically avoided violence. A few bureaucrats argued for keeping the existing classification, claiming this was an isolated incident. The bureau director, a Vaxaran administrator named Kesh, who had held the position for 60 years, finally called for order. We have reviewed the evidence, Kesh announced. Human biological capabilities include exceptional endurance, high skeletal density, rapid healing, advanced tool use, abstract tactical thinking, environmental adaptation, and apparently, suicidal levels of courage when threatened. They are persistence hunters, who evolved by literally running prey to death over days or weeks. They domesticated wolves into pets. They climbed to the top of their planet's food chain, despite lacking natural weapons, armor, or venom. Kesh paused, reviewing the data one more time. Proposed new classification. Class 1 Deceptively Durable Apex Survivor Species. Hunting strictly prohibited under penalty of immediate prosecution. Approach with extreme caution, and preferably from a safe distance. The vote was unanimous. The new classification was transmitted to every registered system within hours, accompanied by case study footage of Marcus defending himself against Vexexeron. The video became required viewing in xenobiology courses across thousands of educational institutions, typically followed by the instructor's warning: do not hunt humans. They are significantly more dangerous than they appear. Marcus returned to work 6 weeks after the incident, his skull still healing but functional enough for light duty. Station management had offered him a promotion, a pay raise, and the option to relocate to a more prestigious facility. He declined everything except the pay raise. "I like it here," he explained to the confused administrator. "It's quiet." The administrator, who had just witnessed Marcus survive an encounter that would have killed most species and subsequently testify at the galaxy's most watched trial, decided not to argue with him. Marcus resumed his cargo handling duties, processed shipment manifests, and occasionally climbed into maintenance shafts to retrieve misplaced items. His routine returned to normal with only minor changes, the occasional news crew requesting interviews, which he politely declined, and the fact that other species now gave him significantly more personal space in the station corridors. The scar on his head, visible when his hair grew back in a slightly different pattern, became a conversation starter he actively avoided discussing. When asked about the incident, he typically changed the subject or claimed he didn't remember much due to the head trauma. This was partially true. His memory of the explosion and immediate aftermath remained fuzzy. But he remembered quite clearly the moment he'd pulled the emergency release on that container, making a split-second decision that probably shouldn't have worked but somehow did. 6 months after the trial, Marcus received a message from the Interstellar Predator Classification Bureau. They wanted to interview him for their official case files, gathering first-hand perspective on the incident for future reference and training purposes. He agreed, mostly because they offered to conduct the interview remotely rather than requiring travel. The interviewer, a Pelvorian researcher named Vex, appeared on his communication screen with professional courtesy. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview, Mr. Webb. We're compiling comprehensive data on the incident for educational purposes. Can you describe your thought process during the encounter?" Marcus considered the question. "Mostly I was trying not to die." "Yes, but your tactical decisions showed remarkable creativity. The fire suppression foam, the chemical explosion, the use of environmental features to your advantage. These weren't random panic responses. You were actively problem-solving under extreme stress." "I used what was available," Marcus said with a shrug. "The hunter had better weapons and armor. I had maintenance equipment and knowledge of the cargo bay. Seemed logical to use my advantages instead of playing his game." Vex made notes on her data pad. "And the decision to compromise the chemical container? You must have known the explosion could kill you as easily as your attacker." "It was that or definitely get killed," Marcus pointed out. "At least the explosion gave me a chance." "Fascinating," Vex muttered, recording his responses. "One final question. Mr. Webb, what would you say to other humans who might encounter similar situations?" Marcus thought about this carefully. "Don't hunt humans, and definitely don't assume we're easy prey just because we don't have claws or scales. We've been problem-solving our way out of dangerous situations for hundreds of thousands of years. It's basically our specialty." Vex nodded appreciatively. "That will be included in the updated training materials. Thank you for your time." The interview ended, and Marcus returned to his normal evening routine, checking shipment schedules for tomorrow, consuming adequate nutrition, and reviewing his music collection for appropriate selections. Across the galaxy, the message spread through official channels and unofficial gossip networks alike. Humans were not to be trifled with. They looked soft and vulnerable, but they were persistence hunters who had evolved specifically to solve problems and survive impossible situations. The Interstellar Predator Classification Bureau updated their database with comprehensive warnings. Xenobiology courses added entire modules on human defensive capabilities, and hunters across civilized space learned a valuable lesson that Vexaron had learned too late. Appearance and capability were not the same thing, especially where humans were concerned. Marcus Webb, cargo specialist on Terminus Station 7, became a footnote in galactic history as the human who fought back. His name appeared in textbooks, training materials, and cautionary tales told to young hunters learning their craft. He remained blissfully unaware of most of this attention, focused instead on his work and the comfortable anonymity of station life. Fame, he had decided, was vastly overrated. Much better to simply do his job, avoid dangerous situations when possible, and maintain his perfect record of not getting hunted by alien predators. The scar on his head served as a permanent reminder that humans occupied a unique position in the galactic ecosystem. Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most naturally armed, but absolutely, definitively, not to be underestimated. Somewhere in a maximum security prison, Vexaron the Magnificent contemplated this lesson daily, reviewing the security footage that had destroyed his reputation, and wondering how a simple hunting expedition had gone so catastrophically wrong. The answer, had anyone bothered to explain it to him, was relatively simple. He had encountered a species that specialized in surviving encounters with things that wanted to kill them. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history dodging predators, using tools, thinking creatively, and refusing to die even when death seemed certain. Vexaron had brought weapons and armor to a fight against millions of years of evolutionary stubbornness.